In the heart of Paris, just steps from the Louvre, the Bank of France is one of the most secure places in the world. At 28 meters deep, the underground room houses the national gold. It also contains an old box of priceless value. Under tight security, like a new Ark of the Covenant, the box is unearthed and its contents filmed for the very first time exclusively. These are the 12 original codices, the notebooks of Leonardo Da Vinci, brought back by Napoleon Bonaparte during the First Italian campaign, housed at the Institut de France.
It's a treasure of war, but we will note that General Bonaparte was not mistaken, since each of his notebooks today is valued for insurance at 55 million euros each. There are 12 of them, which brings us to more than 600 million euros. Documents of this kind represent absolutely considerable sums, but what interests us, however, add at what they contain, what they reveal, the person they talk about. It's the extraordinary mystery of a genius out of a coma, perhaps one of the greatest geniuses of all time, in his daily work, in his daily imagination. First impression for a lay reader is that all this is completely incomprehensible. It is sketched without having to go back over what he has already written. He writes backwards. To read the manuscripts, we use a mirror. We talk about specular writing, speculum, the mirror. It is presented this way, and you can read the text very easily, provided you can speak the Tuscan dialect well.
Few have been able to see up close these mysterious notebooks, catalogued in the 18th century by letters from A to M.
This notebook, the B, corresponds to Leonardo's Milanese years. It is a particularly beautiful and rich notebook. Leonardo always carried his notebooks with him and noted his thoughts and sketched what he observed or imagined. And this notebook is particularly abundant. Here we see some violets. It is one of the botanical drawings found in this codex. Here, a church project. It is one of Leonardo's studies for centrally planned buildings, of which we have several examples throughout the pages. And these notebooks come in different sizes. Some are quarto format, others are smaller, more like pocket notebooks. For example, this one, Notebook L. And this notebook has kept its original cover. It's a rather simple cover. And it's moving to know that he carried it with him constantly during his numerous travels in Italy, particularly in Romagna, where he was especially interested in matters of military art and fortification. These pages allow us to enter into the thought itself.
Leonardo da Vinci is the man of all records. The latest example is from the sale of the Salvator Mundi, meaning Christ Savior of the world. On November 15, 2017, this painting attributed to Leonardo was acquired by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia for the final sum of $450 million. It is the most expensive work of art in all of history.
We have paintings that are icons of global culture. It is not a coincidence that the Mona Lisa is the most famous painting in the world. It's because it's Leonardo da Vinci, an extraordinary person.
It's a monstrous brain. How can one be both the greatest painter, the greatest sculptor of the pawns of their time, the greatest director, a brilliant engineer, a prophetic inventor, but also be interested in geology, sciences, and archaeology?
Ballistics, hydraulics, kinematics.
Geometry, mathematics, anatomy, botany, painting, drawing, sculpture, architecture. It is really frightening.
Yes, it's a bit unsettling, such a variety of talents. because it should be added that Leonardo was very handsome, that he was, apparently, the best dancer of his time, an outstanding musician, and very athletic. Add to that his human qualities.
Leonard is an extremely positive, radiant man. He always had a group of people around him who loved to listen to him. He charms everyone. He is very attractive. He also manages to convince others. He has this impressive power of persuasion.
He worked with Ludovic the Moor, lived with Cesare Borgia, and works for the King of France. Leonardo is considered equal to the great princes.
In the Renaissance, Vasari, who is one of the first biographers of Leonardo, has only one qualifier. Leonardo is divine. Because if there is not a divine and almost miraculous influence, how can all this be explained?
It's someone indefinable. Even now, we can't figure them out. They elude us. The more we delve into it, the more it feels like we can't grasp it.
In fact, truly, he was universal, in the sense that he managed to speak to everyone and still does today. It's not necessary to be a great expert to be moved, to cry in front of a work by Leonardo. Leonard was breathtakingly beautiful. He was tall. He was extremely charming. He was very strong.
He is someone who knows that it is necessary to win people's hearts through intellect, but also through appearance. And he is also a great seducer, someone who wanted to charm in all areas.
Leonardo da Vinci also stands out in the fashion field, with a certain penchant for vanity.
He spends a lot of money on his clothes. So he certainly dresses in a very elegant and refined way.
Imagine Leonard. He eats a lot of colors and dresses in the latest fashion.
He is presented as a sort of arbiter of elegance, like a kind of dandy of the time who dresses completely against the trend. When the fashion is for long clothes, he wears a very short coat. When the fashion is for dark clothes, he has a pink coat. You can see how much he must have influenced and probably particularly impressed his contemporaries with this kind of social ease.
He is very spontaneous, very natural, very free actually. Nothing constrains him.
Extravagant and affable, Leonardo da Vinci also possesses a great sense of humor, with a marked taste for schoolboy jokes.
We can also see in these notebooks there are a lot of jokes. There are amusing puzzles, there are some clever riddles.
Leonard often played with his name, Leonardo, the burning lion, the lion on fire. And one of Leonard's riddles shows a lion catching fire.
For a joke, he was able to make gigantic efforts. It is said that in Rome he had a small office where he would make his visitors wait, and in that little office, he had an extremely discreet hole, which he had spent a crazy amount of time cleaning pig intestines.
He blew into his intestines and made them swell, to the point where they filled the room. The people in the room would huddle in a corner because it seemed like this giant ball was going to crush them. And that entertained him. It amused him greatly.
There was young Leonard, full of life and who most certainly enjoyed life a lot.
Leonardo da Vinci is a free man in all fields, and perhaps also with his sexuality.
Unfortunately, I've just learned that we will know more about Leonardo da Vinci's sexuality, and we remain unsatisfied because he never talks about it.
Leonard manages to keep the secret in that area too. Many hypotheses have been suggested, but they all remain hypotheses.
In Florence, in the 15th century, homosexuality remains prohibited by the church. In the worst cases, it can lead to the stake, but it is relatively tolerated because it is very widespread in high society and artistic circles.
It was far from exceptional. The word Florenzer, that is Florentin in German, means a homosexual. That's how they said it in slang at the time.
To combat homosexual practices, there was an anonymous tip mailbox in Florence. These letters, still preserved in the city archives, were collected in the morning by the officers of the night in monasteries, a kind of morality police.
And this record is the anonymous denunciation dated April 9th, 1476, against Leonardo da Vinci. It was written here that Leonardo da Vinci was accused of engaging in sodomy with Jacopo Saltarelli.
Jacopo Saltarelli is a 17-year-old goldsmith. He was one of Leonardo's young models. The accusations mention sodomy and even all male parties.
The matter was sort of hushed up simply because there was a lack of evidence to demonstrate that Leonard indeed had sexual relations with Saltarelli, so the matter was forgotten. Marielle did not marry. He did not start a family.
So, it cannot be ruled out that Leonardo also engaged in homosexuality.
Questioned, Leonardo da Vinci is finally cleared at the end of a humiliating procedure. This misadventure will lead him to greater discretion in his private life. Another clue about his private life, the relationship with his apprentice, Salai.
He is going to recruit a very young boy, Jean-Jacques. Very quickly, he will receive the nickname Salai, Little Devil.
Salai is the little demon who lives with Leonard, who steals the styluses of the assistants, who makes all kinds of mischief, who steals money, whom Leonard forgives for everything. There is a little note from Leonard addressed to Salai. Let's make peace. Never war again.
On another note, Leonard writes, ladro, bugiardo, guillotone, larron, voleur, menteur, blouton. So this Salai was a bit of a thug.
At first it seemed like he was an apprentice, but it's hard to fully believe that. Maybe he was a model. Maybe he was a young man he liked. Maybe he was a young man who caught his eye, which can't be ruled out naturally.
Sources tell us that Sala was a marvel of grace and beauty. So certainly, Leonardo, who was always looking for creative inspiration, must have been struck by the beauty of this young boy.
Salai, his model, his little devil, whom some recognize in Leonardo's St. John the Baptist.
He delighted in Salai's curly hair. These might be fun little references to remind us that Leonard had a liking for good young boys.
In Leonardo's notebooks, there are many more or less obscene drawings, and the name Salai appears.
There are drawings of male members in all kinds of orifices that can be used for something other than reproduction, and a probably mischievous hand has written Salai in front of something that must resemble a boy's anus. So it could be malice, but it could also be a workshop joke, someone who wanted to play a prank on him. Or maybe Salai himself, who had fun with it. He was quite capable of that.
Leonard represents sexuality in a very bizarre way. He draws, for example, a cross-section of intercourse which is sometimes on the verge of psychosis. In a psychosis, the idea is that there is no boundary between one's own body and the body of the other.
A drawing by Leonardo could also shed light on his sexuality. Found almost by chance at a private collection, it is one of the 800 Sebastians that Leonardo mentions in his notebooks, and it is the only one authenticated to date. Classified as a national treasure, it is valued at least 15 million euros.
It's something completely unheard of. It is still the greatest name in the history of art. It's a Saint Sebastian by Leonardo da Vinci. You can recognize Leonardo's left-handed style. You can clearly see that the lines extend to the left, and Saint Sebastian is depicted before being pierced by arrows.
It is the first reappearance of a drawing in over 100 years in France. There are almost none left in nature. It's a miracle. It's a work that is important in relation to the intimate Leonardo, which really connects to him in the sense that Saint Sebastian is the patron saint of homosexuals. Saint Sebastian is young. He is in his 30s, and this corresponds exactly to Leonardo's age at the time he conceived this drawing. It is certain that he puts a lot of himself into it. You cannot say it is a self-portrait. But in any case, he is inspired by himself, his life, and undoubtedly by the antagonism between religion and the struggle to love the male body, and thus to represent it in an attractive way as well.
It's difficult to truly understand the psychology of Bernard da Vinci. He might be someone who, moreover, feels a certain modesty about himself. He doesn't often open
Although
up.
Leonardo wrote thousands and thousands of pages, personal revelations are extremely rare. It wasn't until Jean-Jacques Rousseau that introspection started to become fashionable.
In his mind, there is a shadow that constantly threatens him. You can see it in his writings. There is always that ambiguity between good and evil, somewhere. The shadow and the light battling, somewhere, even within his own person.
Deeply connected to nature, Leonardo da Vinci also differs from his contemporaries in terms of diet. A pioneer in many areas, the man makes choices that are out of step with his time.
Leonard would be very fashionable today because he is one of the greatest and most famous vegetarians. That is quite an extraordinary thing. He was known for that. Contemporaries say that our Leonard does not eat animals.
Imagine that at a time when only the rich could afford to eat meat, there was someone like Leonardo who decided that meat was bad for health. Absolutely extraordinary.
No one in Europe was vegetarian. It was totally impossible. And he wrote a lot about it. Do not make your stomach a cemetery. The idea revolted him.
A love for animals and a special fascination with birds.
Leonard went to the markets to buy bird cages, open the cage, and watch the birds fly freely in the skies.
"25 kilometers from Florence, as the crow flies, in the heart of Chianti Montalbano, lies the town of Vinci, from which Leonardo derives his name. His ancestors settled there, and his father, Master Pierrot, is one of the notable figures of the town.
The Da Vinci family was a lineage of notaries starting from the 14th century. Notaries who had even obtained Florentine citizenship. This means they had the right to hold magistracies in the Florentine Republic. Not all notaries in the city had this privilege.
His father is not married, and in fact, he probably seduced a peasant woman from the vicinity of Vinci, a certain Catherine.
The problem is that he probably fell in love, but marrying her was out of the question.
And so Leonardo is an illegitimate son, born out of wedlock. This is what was called at the time a bastard.
Stendhal nicely said he is a child of love.
Leonard is born in the night from the 14th to the 15th of April, 1452, about 3 hours after the Ave Maria, the evening prayer.
We are fortunate to know this. It is an extraordinary document. It happens very rarely. It is his grandfather who, undoubtedly in a great moment of affection, notes it in a notebook. Today, a grandson was born to me, the son of my son, Pierrot.
Founded in the 13th century, Santa Croce is the historic church of the town of Vinci. Today, it holds another precious testimony from the early days of Leonard.
We are in the baptistry of the Church of Santa Croce in Vinci. These are the historical baptismal fonts, and this is where little Leonardo, just born, received the sacraments of baptism.
Master Piero accepts his first son, for now his only male heir, but without legitimizing him, and Caterina remains on the fringes of the family circle.
Catherine is distanced by the family as she does not even appear among the guests at little Leonard's baptism. She will always remain in the background.
Leonard's family decided on an arranged marriage for Katerina in order to silence the scandal. So Katerina married a certain Antonio Buti, known as Catabriga, the priest reader.
A certainly very violent, angry man, because Catabriga means the brawler, someone who never misses an opportunity to get into a fight.
Leonard will be taken from his mother very early. We know that at 5 years old, he is already with his father's family, specifically in his grandfather's house.
In Anciano, a locality 3 kilometers from Vinci, a house is traditionally identified as the one where Leonardo grew up. It remains amidst landscapes almost unchanged for centuries.
Leonardo joins his paternal family, surrounded by his grandfather Antonio and his uncle Francesco. We can imagine a very curious young Leonardo, very attentive to nature and animals. A Leonardo who undoubtedly observed various mechanisms, like the wheels of mills, but also the atmosphere, the effects of light and burning. One can also think that the landscapes of the Vinci region influenced Leonardo and accompanied him throughout his life and all his work.
His oldest drawing is a landscape drawing, and we can imagine that indeed, in his younger years, he started observing the world, the stars, the moon, the sun, and already tried to understand how things work around him.
We think that in this particular capacity of observation, there is something of the future scholar who uses nature to create.
But the boy's future is still uncertain, especially since after 4 successive marriages, Master Piero finally has legitimate heirs on whom all his hopes rest, to the point of one day excluding Leonard from his will. As a bastard, certain opportunities are forbidden to him.
Illegitimacy in the 15th century is not a problem in the ruling classes. However, for this particular category of notaries, merchants, it is more difficult, especially for notaries. For Leonard, it has one consequence. He won't be able to become a notary, and he also won't be able to go to university. He'll remain an uneducated man.
So quickly, undoubtedly, after 10 years, it was necessary to start thinking about what Leonardo da Vinci was going to do. If he was already starting to draw well, it is possible that he was made to attend the Scuola d'Abaco. It's really a 2 or 3 year school where you learn the basics to manage, whether pursuing a career in commerce or in the arts.
The young Leonardo shows a sharp and precocious intelligence, but it is especially his extraordinary drawing skill that captures Master Piero's attention.
One day, the father took a bundle of his drawings and went to show them to one of the great Florentine artists he knew. He said, "What do you think?" And the other said, "Ah, yes, it's really good for a kid. Will you take him as an apprentice?" "Yes."
He was perhaps not a very present father, but it must be admitted that Pierre had the intelligence to recognize his son's talent and enroll him in Andrea del Verrocchio's workshop.
Verrocchio is really not just anyone. He is undoubtedly the head of the best workshop in Florence. He is the artist of the Medici court, in fact. The Medicis are truly a family, in addition to being extremely cultured people, and especially Lorenzo the Magnificent, who really wants to develop around him an intelligentsia. People who, in the fields of literature, history, sciences, and arts, embody perfection, a return to ancient models, but at the same time a great modernity. What he also wants is to invent new things, new forms, to show that Florence is truly the intellectual center of Italy. And Ser Piero, by placing Leonardo in Verrocchio's workshop, knew that he would allow him to practice art at the highest level.
It's a city that, since the 14th century, had written in its decrees that it wanted to be beautiful. It is a bustling city with very, very beautiful palaces. It is a city of merchants and craftsmen, a city that also shows off its wealth a bit through festivals and tournaments.
And he must be absolutely overwhelmed by the noises, the smells, and especially by a city that is so much under construction.
The city is a republic that is cleverly manipulated and controlled by the Medici family.
The Medici's grip on Florence arouses envy. In 1478, the conspiracy of a rival family, the Pazzi, ends in a bloodbath. Witness to the fierce repression, Leonardo even attended the execution of one of the leaders at the Bargello Palace, where his father works.
This is here, at the corner of the staircase and the lodge, where Bernardo Bandini and Baroncelli were hanged. Leonardo was here. He could attend this hanging. And we know this because he left a very detailed drawing of Bernardo Baroncelli, also noting the elements of his clothing, his small black cap, his large coat, his pink doublet, and his black hose.
Besides its proximity to the seat of power, the Bargello Palace is located 5 minutes from Verrocchio's workshop, where Leonardo cut his teeth. Sponsored by the Medici, the studio enjoys a variety of commissions that provide young artists with excellent training.
The uniqueness of Verrocchio's workshop is that it operates in a very versatile manner. One is a painter, but also learns the art of sculpture, mechanics, and goldsmithing. The work is collective, and one does not overly specialize in one field.
It worked like a family. So the young apprentices lived in a community with their master, who became somewhat like a spiritual father.
All the young people who will go through Verrocchio's workshop are those who will dominate the artistic scene of Florence in the years 1480s to 90s. Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Perugino, Signorelli. All the people who will, for example, paint the Sistine Chapel, well, they all went through Verrocchio's workshop.
The Bargello Palace today houses a collection of artworks, one of which demonstrates Verrocchio's talent and might evoke the grace of the young Leonardo da Vinci.
Here we have David, who just fought Goliath. What did Verrocchio create? Perhaps using Leonardo da Vinci as a model. Of course, it's a tradition that isn't supported by evidence, but it was still common in his workshops to use his apprentices as models. This grace mixed with arrogance is a kind of evocation of Leonardo da Vinci's youth and beauty, especially when compared to Donatello's David. And here, we can clearly see how the biblical hero has lowered eyes. He is in a state of nostalgia, a melancholy. So, two works produced in Florence in the 15th century, two opposing interpretations of victory.
Verrocchio's workshop is associated with colossal projects, the dome of Santa Maria del Fiore Cathedral. Leonardo probably helped crown its lantern with a gilded copper sphere weighing over 2 tons. But it is indeed in the field of painting that the young apprentice makes his first breakthrough. His talent is put to use when Master Verrocchio works on the baptism of Christ.
It's a painting that is truly in the tradition, in the style of Quattrocento Volontà. Everything is constructed through a line that is hard, a line that was really called maniera secca, the dry manner. There is a certain harshness in the flesh.
St. John the Baptist baptizes Jesus. There are angels present at the scene, and Verrocchio allows Leonardo the opportunity to paint a small figure, the one just at the bottom left, which is worthy of a student. And indeed, Leonardo will paint an extraordinary figure, with incredible dynamism and, above all, extraordinary life.
You can see the softness, the lightness of the hair, the contours of the face blending into the atmosphere. So it's an initial definition of what was later called sfumato.
And it's a very beautiful story, the baptism of Christ, because it's the moment when Leonardo shows that he is already very young but superior to others.
The biographers tell us that once Verrocchio saw the quality and beauty of this angel, he decided never to touch his brushes again.
Poor disciple who does not surpass his master, Leonardo will write one day. His beginnings, more than promising, are given special insight in light of a series of drapery exercises carried out over the years at Verrocchio's. The drawings department of the Louvre Museum holds several of these rare sketches on linen canvas of admirable facture.
Light is truly one of Leonardo's great passions, and the play of shadow and light. And in the series of draperies, the aim is both to be able to translate the deepest blacks, the highlights, but also the entire gradation of greys. It feels like draperies are chiseled out of metal because the highlights stop at these very strong breaks in the draperies. Like the play of light on a bronze, this work is specific to Leonard.
Enrolled in 1472 in the Guild of St. Luke, the Painters Corporation, Leonardo da Vinci received his first significant commission for a Florentine monastery, the Annunciation. Its composition, very balanced and extremely structured, already reveals in the artist a quest for perfection, bordering on obsession. But his style truly marks a decisive turning point with the Adoration of the Magi, a work commissioned 8 years later by another monastery.
With the Adoration of the Magi, whether at the moment he draws or when he paints, it is the conquest of freedom. The preparatory sketches for the Adoration of the Magi are dazzling because they are full of erasures, full of inventions, with dynamism, with an extraordinary sense of movement.
In this painting, we see Leonardo's ability to revolutionize and innovate traditional iconographic schemes. Usually, the Virgin of the Child was on the right or left side of the image. Leonardo places the Virgin of the Child at the center, like a pillar, like a pivot, around which all the characters from the four corners of the world are placed.
He wants not only to represent the procession of the Magi, but he also wants to represent the specific light of divine illumination in this particular moment, in this miracle, and represent all the reactions of all the characters to the eruption of the divine into the real.
On the edge of the painting, a character holds a very special importance, probably the depiction of Leonardo himself. This would thus be the unique self-portrait from his early years.
Normally, the painter, when depicting themselves, looks at the viewer. For a simple reason, it is necessary to look in a mirror to draw oneself, and therefore the head cannot be turned. This is not quite the case in Leonardo's Adoration of the Magi, because he does not look at the viewer. So, using a mirror trick is indeed possible.
Is this evasive look that of the artist unconsciously giving up on a work that is too ambitious? Because Leonardo is stalling and cannot meet the commission's deadline. Despite his extraordinary rise, Leonardo, aged 30 years, is already notorious for his slowness and the incompletion of his works.
If we compare with other artists, Botticelli, Grandioso, well, those people, they just keep painting. Leonardo, he produces practically nothing. In the end, it's quite convenient to stay with Verrocchio. There's money, there are great commissions, and he can continue to perfect his skills, to already be able to do what he wants. Throughout his life, that's what Leonardo sought, to have the ideal conditions to thrive in all areas, and he could only find that in the context of the court.
Very clearly, Leonard has chosen his side. He is going with the princes. His career is much more favored. We see it in the manuscript of that time, where he expresses anxieties about creativity, about the passing time. And then there is the anxiety of not being able to finish the Adoration of the Magi on time. He gives up on a painting that was too complex. It is time to leave.
February 1482. During the Carnival period, Leonardo enters the Lombard capital. He is received at the Sforza Castle, the residence of the Dukes of Milan.
Leonardo arrives in Milan as a musician with a gift. A lyre made with a dragon head carved from a horse skull, an absolutely marvelous thing, and Leonard plays it. Leonard is primarily an artist ambassador.
Gian Galea Sforza is the official Duke of Milan, but it is truly his uncle Ludovic Sforza, known as the Dead, who holds the reins of power. Leonardo da Vinci is ready to do anything to win the favor of this powerful man, as evidenced by the draft of a letter where he lists his skills.
He wrote the first curriculum vitae in history, and he used a terrible scheme. If you read this skill one by one, he presented himself not as a painter, but as a military engineer capable of creating incredibly complex and deadly machines. In fact, the Duke needs these weapons, so he hires Leonard as a military engineer.
Leonard's audacity pays off. Ludovic bites him without being able to put the Florentine's talent at the service of Sforza's renown. He entrusts him with the project of creating a colossal equestrian statue of the founder of the dynasty. Leonard gets to work without delay.
He went around all the stables in the city and Milan to see which were the most beautiful animals, and he drew them. But one had an especially beautiful neck, another had admirably muscular legs, the third had a superb mane, etc. All these drawings were taken, combined, and one achieved the purebred animal.
Beyond the appearance, Leonard committed to giving his bronze statue an immense scale, over 7 meters high. Unprecedented, this incredible technical challenge will force him to constantly revise his plans for nearly 15 years.
The complexity is in melting 13 tons of bronze practically at once and filling a mold. Leonardo invents a system with 3 furnaces that he will synchronize. How does he synchronize them? With gunpowder. So that when the molten bronze reaches a certain point in the mold, it explodes on the surface, and we can start the second furnace and so on, with the third furnace.
A still more delicate problem remains, raising and turning the beast with all the equipment, nearly 100 tons in total. A Herculean feat for the end of the 15th century. Reconstructions at the Leonardo III Museum in Milan now offer a glimpse of this.
Today we would use enormous cranes. Leonardo, however, could only rely on his ingenuity, but here, for example, is a giant raising machine. Thanks to its complex mechanism, even a child, by turning the winches, could lift the horse, albeit very slowly. It was necessary to raise 1 meter and thus breathe 1 millimeter.
Unfortunately for Leonard, war breaks out. When the French arrive in 95 in Italy, bronze is needed for making cannons. And furthermore, the French are going to destroy the clay prototype in terracotta that Leonardo had made, so the project is forever buried.
Since he couldn't immortalize the glory of the Sforzas in bronze, Leonardo enhanced the prestige of their court through lavish celebrations, for which he managed the staging and special effects. One of them will go down in history as the Feast of Paradise. It took place in 1489 on the occasion of the wedding of Gian Galeazzo Sforza and Isabella of Aragon, a Neapolitan princess. It was a celebration based on...
I surprised them with the stage devices. Isabel was invited to enter the room at 8 o'clock. At that moment, a concert is organized in her honor with Neapolitan airs. At one moment, as night falls, one of the walls of the room rises, and behind it appears paradise.
It's an extraordinary piece of mechanics. It involves rotating the entire mythological repertoire with the gods, Jupiter, with Apollo, on a whole series of platforms that function practically like an astronomical clock, with stars revolving around the stage, which opens like an egg.
Leonard also draws the exceptional costumes that could inspire a designer today. They are so creative, so original.
It's opera before the opera. It's total art with pyrotechnics, with music and celestial music. Leonard is both a man of theatre, a man of music, and a great mechanic whom we admire, practically a magician.
Having become indispensable to his pleasure, Leonardo da Vinci frequently accompanies Ludovico the Moor 35 kilometers from Milan to Vigevano, a holiday palace where the Sforza court spends its summer quarters.
So, it was a place of pleasure, relaxation for bales, ceremonies, banquets, theatrical presentations, naturally under the direction of Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo was a figure who played the lyre and the viola divinely, but above all, he improvised verses.
And love is never absent from these gallant, not-so-innocent games.
In the castle of Vigevano, Ludovico il Moro also had a room for a special friend of his, Cecilia Gallerani, the Lady of Melmelino. Cecilia Gallerani was the official friend before Ludovico il Moro's marriage to Beatrice, but also after Ludovico's marriage to Beatrice d'Este. A very strong bond that allowed Leonardo to create this drawing, which is the first modern drawing in the history of art.
It was not just about depicting the features of a face, but the passions of the soul. Leonardo is the inventor of the psychological portrait. Lady with an Ermine is absolutely admirable. We have a living character who is dynamic. There is a spotlight on her. She turns to the side. A smile appears on her face. There is a very lively aspect, a personality that you can subtly perceive taking shape.
She is a woman who is intellectually on par with the man in front of her. She holds in her hands this ermine that is captivated, unable to escape, and which represents Ludovic the Dead.
In the medieval bestiary, the ermine is the animal that prefers to kill itself rather than be captured. Hence the idea of a Ludovic as an honest and highly virtuous man. The relationship between Ludovic and Cecilia Gallerani is documented by letters from Italian ambassadors who came to the castle. One ambassador in particular reveals that Ludovic fell ill because of his sexual relations with a prostitute. But this prostitute was actually Cecilia Gallerani.
Jealous, the Duke's wife, Beatrice d'Este, has Cecilia driven from the court. But Ludovico is incorrigible, and it is again to Leonardo da Vinci, a privileged witness to his infidelities, that he orders a portrait of his next mistress, Lucrezia Crivelli, better known today as La Belle Ferronnière.
In the Belle Ferronnière, Leonardo portrayed feminine eroticism in this gaze that is insolent, directly addressing the viewer, even provoking them.
The portrait is not just the shell. It's the ambiguity, the poetry of a personality's interior. Cecilia Gallerani is very pleasant, very likable. La Belle Ferronnière is more austere, more distant. You can sense that she is a woman much less approachable, much more distant with her public. Ludovic is aware that Leonardo can provide the most refined, lively, and subtle image of his intellectually dazzling court. It is not just a political assertion through power, the grand equestrian monument, but also illustration through charm.
With growing notoriety, Leonardo must handle new commissions. That is why the master establishes his workshop in Milan, where he replicates the collaborative model he learned with Verrocchio. But it is alone that Leonardo da Vinci will execute in Milan one of his most spectacular works. It is a commission from Ludovico the Moor for the Dominican convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie. Destined to become a mausoleum in honor of the Sforzas, the basilica already houses many treasures. The task falls to Leonardo to adorn the monks' refectory with an appropriate theme, the scene of the Last Supper of Christ with his disciples.
The scene is the accomplishment of the Renaissance. It is an immense composition with incredible strength. It is the first time this happens. The scene opens a new chapter in the history of art, in the history of humanity.
Leonard constructs a space, a trompe-l'oeil, geometrically structured. The apostles are organized in groups of 3, forming irregular triangles. But there is only one triangle that is the perfect triangle, and that is of Christ, obviously to evoke the moral perfection of Jesus. The moment that Leonard decides to represent is crucial. It is the moment when Jesus informs his disciples that someone will betray him, and so it represents the emotional reaction, this electric current that passes from one disciple to another, to find out who would have committed this terrifying act.
Some are offended, some are completely stunned, some are surprised. And this movement of each character's soul is what interests Leonard.
Judas is in hesitation. He has not yet chosen between good and evil. He does not know what he will do with his destiny.
And Leonardo takes all his time to capture Judas's features, to the point of seriously making the monastery's prior impatient.
One of the very nice anecdotes about the execution of the scene where the impatient prior is really fed up. Leonard is not progressing. What's going on? He's been at it for years, but he's not doing anything. So he complains, he goes to see the Duke. Why isn't he doing it? Why isn't he making progress? The Duke also says, "But Leonard, it seems you're doing nothing. You never come." And Leonard apparently would indeed come, observe, make a tiny brushstroke, then leave. And then he wouldn't be seen for a week.
Relations with the priest may have deteriorated a little, and Leonard reportedly added, "I am looking everywhere for someone who looks sly enough to play Judas. But perhaps by looking at you, Father, I may have found him."
Leonard will explain to Ludovico that a great genius, the less he works, the more he achieves.
So he had this extremely bizarre way of working, but which reflects above all someone incredibly perfectionist. But like no painter ever was.
Leonard is someone who never mastered the fresco technique, which requires a lot of speed. And above all, you don't make mistakes and you can never go back on your idea. For Leonard, that's unbearable with frescoes. It's unbearable. He always needs the freedom to revisit his ideas, to perfect things.
To get ever closer to perfection, Leonardo invents an experimental oil technique that allows him to continuously refine his strokes. But this process, as ingenious as it is risky, comes at a price.
What is terrible in this scene is that it is both a tremendous achievement and at the same time, very quickly, a technical disaster. 2 are alive, pieces have fallen, and today what we see is actually a ghost. It's the memory of what Leonardo painted. The scene is definitively lost.
If the original work is lost, current technology allows it to be resurrected in a way. The Leonardo III Museum in Milan revives many vanished elements.
Leonard didn't just create this famous rectangle, but much more. He might have even painted the ceiling. 33 meters of celestial vault with lapis lazuli and small golden stars. Try to imagine what it meant to enter a room entirely painted in a three-dimensional way. Now, to go into the house of Jesus under a starry sky, it was the most incredible thing of the time. Leonard invented virtual reality at the end of the 15th century. Today, to use the best of technology to offer museum creators, a machine has gone back in time to see the scene as it was around Leonard. That is a true marvel.
Leonardo da Vinci dreamed so much about the future that he anticipated it 5 centuries ahead of his time. One can say that Leonardo da Vinci is very present, very current, very modern. He was the pioneer of innovation, the leader of engineers.
He will devote his life to the study of the universe, with an ever-awake curiosity, capable of questioning ideas that, sometimes in 2,000 years, all his life, he will keep this extremely rational mindset that says, yes, okay, I've been told this, but let's check if it's true. Or even, I think it, but am I sure?
Man without formal education, but a disciple of experience. As he defines himself, Leonardo is nonetheless indebted to the encyclopedic knowledge that flourished in all fields during the Renaissance.
One cannot understand Leonardo if one does not understand all his predecessors. Leonardo did not invent the machine gun. Leonardo did not invent the tank. Leonardo did not invent a whole series of machines, even gear techniques that he presents. These are not his inventions. Leonard synthesizes the knowledge of his time, but he goes further.
Leonard obtained the medieval manuscripts, and he copied all the machines from other inventors. Then Leonard improved them all, because he draws much better than the other engineers.
By isolating certain details and creating labeled cutaway plans, Leonard invents industrial drawing. In his own way, he thus contributes to the technological advancement needed to compensate for the labor shortage.
Leonard finds himself in a time when the Great Plague eliminated so many people that men had to be replaced by machines. So the entire 15th century, particularly in Tuscany, was a time of great technological innovation.
And Leonard will distinguish himself with a remarkably avant-garde approach, creating technology inspired by nature, which makes him a pioneer of biomimicry.
There are many dreamlike things, especially the dream of flying. These are often principles related to observing birds. That is to say, if we understand how birds fly, we might succeed in making humans fly.
To turn dreams into reality, Leonard designed several flying machines. Dassault Systems' 3D lab has virtually reconstructed them thanks to the Open Codex project. Today, it has gathered a community of over 200 enthusiasts worldwide who bring Leonardo da Vinci's inventions to life.
A bit of a magical side, being able to imagine piloting this glider, which is much more like a bird than a plane. That must be quite impressive, actually. I am looking at the bending that is done specifically to hold the person who will enter the glider, knowing that they will position themselves here and will be able to operate the cranks on both sides to flap the wings.
In Milan, at the Leonardo III Research Center, Leonardo's flying machines are even reconstructed life-size and in every detail, such as the famous ornithopter. But faced with reality, this engineer has a hard time taking off.
How does the wick work? Because all the elements are quite operable themselves, but it's unbelievable. It looks like something for flying. It wasn't enough to paint the skies, but they had to be folded, a wave of an arm in the air. But it implies cutting a section you don't like. But to the question, could the machine fly? The answer is no. Because no man had the strength to flap wings 10 times per second, it was impossible.
But Leonardo did not only dream. He developed operational machines, mechanisms that even today have not lost their relevance. For example, the odometer.
This allows for measuring distances quite simply by a system of multiplication and gear wheels. It will move this platform here and drop the marbles into a receptacle, and once we've completed the distance, we just need to count the marbles and we know the distance we have covered.
Here again, Leonard is a precursor, because to calculate the kilometers traveled by car, we all have an electronic odometer. Biomimicry, robotics, design, virtual reality. 5 centuries later, industrial engineers prove Leonardo da Vinci right, more visionary than ever.
What drives us is the triumph of science, technology, and art. When he sketched on these very small codices, they were little sketches. It is clear that the person worked in the imagination. He was beyond the limits of the physical domain. With digital technology, especially with three-dimensional, the 3D experience, it's exactly the same thing.
Leonard wants to explore the inside to better express the outside. And to do this, he goes as far as dissecting corpses. In Florence, the Speculum Museum has one of the oldest collections of anatomical wax models.
The church allowed doctors and painters, of course, to perform dissections inside hospitals and universities. But it prohibited the search for the soul inside the body, because it is immaterial. It was believed that the soul is something given by God.
In 1507, Leonardo begins to dissect an old man who has just died before his eyes at the Santa Maria Nuova Hospital. He looks for the reasons for this gentle death and makes a major discovery: the causes of a heart attack.
There is a description from him, which is a clinical description like a doctor could have made of osteoarthritis. But he was the first to do it. And he sees that an artery of the heart has become shortened, dry, hard, and a bit clogged. And he thinks maybe that's the cause of death.
And then he discovers that there are vortices inside the ventricles. This is truly one of the most important discoveries, because the choir will really be analyzed from the 17th century onward.
Beyond the mysteries of death, Leonard wants to track down the secrets of life to their origin. He dissects a pregnant woman, then her fetus.
This is the first person to find the 3 membranes surrounding fetuses, and also the first to draw the correct position of the fetus inside the womb. Because before, we didn't know how it was arranged inside the womb.
It's a dreadful job. We don't do it for fun. And then once we understand the muscles, the rigor, the nerves, or the bones, the rest holds no interest for an artist. Yet, not only does he dissect them, but above all, he tries to understand. Because he knows that a representation that sticks to appearances, to the facade, will not delve into the soul of things. But that's what he tirelessly pursues, whether with his scalpel, or with his pencil, or with his brush.
There is no Leonardo the painter, Leonardo the scientist. No, Leonardo became the great painter because he was a very great scientist.
Gifted with an extraordinary eye, Leonardo da Vinci also seeks to capture the moment, to dissect each movement.
I am convinced that he has some kind of sensitive, almost superhuman quality, meaning he is capable of breaking down movement very quickly. For example, he sees the movement of a dragonfly's wing beats, he sees them, and Leonardo created a treatise on movement where he breaks down human movement. It is already a cinematic vision where he breaks down image by image.
We have many drawings of cats, for example, from him. These are cats he studied from life. The amusing part, for instance, with the cats is that in the middle, there's a tiny dragon slipping in, and if one is not careful, it can be mistaken for a cat too. But that's Leonardo's method. That is to say, his mind constantly works by analogy.
Whirlpools, whether they are hair whirlpools, water whirlpools, or the whirlpools of blood in heart valves, are for Leonardo analogies that prove there are echoes between the world above and the world below.
Leonardo said there is a connection between the body and nature. The waters are like stones, flesh is like earth, and blood is like rivers.
Deprived of his protector, Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo hesitates for a while to side with the French. Sought after from all quarters, he first offers his services as a military engineer to Venice, but the projects remain unfinished. In Mantua, he begins a portrait of Duchess Isabella d'Este, which is also unfinished. Leonard makes multiple trips to Rome and Florence while waiting for the providential man. And like a devil sprung from its box, it is the formidable Cesare Borgia who calls him to new adventures.
It may seem quite surprising that Leonardo chose to work for Cesare Borgia, an extremely violent, bestial, very controversial of his time. But it must be remembered that Cesar is the son of a pope, Pope Alexander VI, and also he is very close to the King of France.
This great captain is going to try to carve out a principality north of Rome, between the Adriatic and the Mediterranean. So a very, very important slice of Italy.
Leonard probably took the risk, but he thought to himself, it's going to work. He is someone who will build a grand duchy, become a very important man, and with him, I will be like with Ludovic. I will be able to fully blossom.
On June 21st, 1502, Leonardo joins Cesare Borgia in Urbino, an important ducal city he has just conquered.
We have the passport written by Cesare Borgia, named Leonardo da Vinci, his great plenipotentiary military engineer. Leonardo was on the road with the troops of Cesare Borgia. Leonardo, engineer, invented movable bridges. He is going to map the entire region. He will be able to visit all the fortresses in this context.
Among these fortresses, Leonardo stops for nearly 2 months at the one in Imola, where Cesare Borgia has gathered his troops.
Cesare Borgia assigns Leonardo the task of checking the condition of the structures, their strength, and imagining improvements. So Leonard sketches and suggests optimizations, especially on the ravelins. These are the circular defensive elements. In other words, the outposts of the fortress. The passage of Leonardo left a very important document from a scientific point of view, but also artistic. This is the map of Imola. It's a planimetric view of the city, a very precise, very accurate plan, a bird's eye view, so to speak. Leonardo naturally had neither a plane nor a drone or other means of support, but he had his mind and his eyes.
men of war. He is in the front row to witness all the horrors of the battlefields.
It is true that Leonardo defines war as a most beastly folly, one of the most beastly madnesses. So certainly, from a rational point of view, he rejected war and all its consequences.
It was supposed to be fundamentally pacifistic. But then, there is the reality of people. And if you want to be someone important and close to a great politician, you must serve all his interests, and that involves the art of war to make the prince win.
But the death of Pope Alexander VI in 1503 precipitates the fall of his son, Cesare Borgia. Leonardo loses his protector again and returns to Florence, where his glory was born.
When Leonardo returns to Florence, he settles back in the artistic capital. That means there is rivalry, competition among the artists. This is not Ludovico il Moro's Milan. He finds the old generation, Botticelli, Signorelli, Perugino, and especially a young man who is starting to make a name for himself, a certain Michelangelo, who created the Pietà of St. Peter's in Rome, which dazzles everyone. He's someone who will soon create David, that extraordinary nude in a monumental size.
Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo seem to cordially hate each other. It is possible that the origin of the conflict is a comparison between types of art, and Leonardo had explained that painting was superior to sculpture, which obviously could only irritate the young Michelangelo. One can also imagine that there are jealousies.
Leonard is an extremely sunny person. He liked comfort, liked to work when he felt like it. He always had a circle of people around him who loved to listen to him. Michelangelo was an extremely tortured man, dark, difficult, very passionate, who physically destroyed himself for his work.
This rivalry culminates in a showdown at the end of the year 1530. It takes place at the Palazzo della Signoria in the Hall of the 500. Leonardo is commissioned to paint a monumental fresco depicting a great military achievement of the Republic, the Battle of Anghiari. And to further sting the artist's pride, the government simultaneously commissions Michelangelo for another battle fresco in the same room.
The Florentines are very clever. They know that if they want Leonardo to finish, they put him in not very agreeable conditions, which is rivalry. Leonardo will fully engage in this composition. And truly, when you see the preparatory sketches, they are full of scribbles, full of inventions. It's truly an extraordinary thing.
And then, Leonard decided to create something that had never been done, which is to paint war as it is in all its horror. After 2 years of military service with Cesare Borgia, he is very confident in what war is.
When he describes battles, he says that the painter must know how to depict the dust that rises during the battles.
So he will represent the inhumanity of rivers of blood in the mud.
The horses struggling, the men fighting. There is sweat, perspiration, the blood flowing.
Michelangelo will choose something else. The Battle of Cassina is more about the psychology before the battle. It's the fact that the men are always on alert, ready to intervene to defend the replica of Florence. And it's quite an astonishing scene. There is no war. So these are two opposing choices. Michelangelo is ultimately perhaps the most original. Leonardo is perhaps more classic, but it is perhaps the most powerful image.
But what promised to be the greatest duel in the history of art is cut short. Michelangelo abandons the project at the sketch stage. He is called to Rome to paint the Sistine Chapel.
And Leonardo, it's another technical disaster. He doesn't know how to do wall painting. And again, he's going to tinker with something, but it's not working. It's not working.
Today, only copies, including Rubens's, allow us to get an idea of Leonardo's lost work.
It's truly a tragedy not to have seen these painted compositions. You can imagine, but they would be things on monumental formats. People would flock to them. It would be the Sistine Chapel of Florence. This Battle of Anghiari changed the course of art.
Following this new failure, Leonard leaves Florence for Milan, still under French rule. He recreates his studio and enriches it with a new recruit, Francesco Melzi, a disciple who will remain with Leonard until the end of his life.
He is an aristocrat, a highly cultured young man, with whom Leonardo has a much more intellectually sophisticated relationship. Melzi will become responsible for all of Leonardo's papers, and he will be his heir.
Melzi was the promise of being able to put in writing all the theoretical treatises he had in his head.
Francesco Melzi and other students undoubtedly contributed significantly to the St. John the Baptist Bacchus, a painting attributed to Leonardo. This masterpiece has unfortunately suffered the ravages of time. The Louvre entrusted it to the French Museum's Research and Restoration Center in the expert hands of Cinzia Pasquali, a meticulous restoration with almost surgical precision.
Is it really by Leonardo or a workshop? That we haven't answered yet, and maybe we won't answer that question. When we enter the painting, when we examine it before restoring it, it's the whole set of materials we look at. It is St. John the Baptist Bacchus. In its current state, this work is completely obscured by old restorations that have deteriorated, damages that have occurred over time, so we no longer see it as it was. Cleaning is an operation that is, I would say, the most perilous because it is irreversible. Once we've removed something, we can't put it back. So it's an operation where we take our time to make sure not to remove something that is too historically significant. For example, they discovered a little rabbit that was buried. It's there, actually. You see, it's a little rabbit looking at the fields, and it was under a large overpainting. They are, I would say, so dirty, the blacks by Vinci, because we have hardly dared to touch them, that it's a very important discovery. This St. John the Baptist Bacchus, he thought he had a strange look, that he was not so saintly. Leonardo always had a painting style to express feelings. Sometimes those feelings, they are perhaps not very Catholic feelings. Can we think that? Maybe.
When he arrives in Rome in 1513, he is working for someone very important, Julian Medici, the Pope's brother. He is housed not just anywhere, but at the Vatican, in the Belvedere, one of the most beautiful palaces in Rome, and he is entrusted with important tasks, specifically engineering works.
But his painting skills are hardly requested anymore, because in Rome, the artistic competition is tough at the dawn of the 16th century.
Leonard had acquired a reputation as an artist of easel paintings, of small dimensions.
The Pope is an extremely cultured man, but also extremely pragmatic, and he prefers artists who work quickly.
Everyone knew he was unable to lead these large projects, to lead the Sistine Chapel project like Michelangelo, to lead the decoration of the Vatican rooms like Raphael. These young boys were much younger than him, and it was known that they were artists capable of seeing things through.
Very quickly, Leonard realizes that in Rome, there is no place for him.
Unexpected twist. An unforeseen event will change his destiny. In 1515, Francis I, the newly crowned King of France, claims the Duchy of Milan, thus reigniting the Italian Wars. All covered in glory after the Battle of Marignano, he meets the Pope in Bologna to negotiate a concordat. Accompanying the papal delegation, Leonardo da Vinci was likely a witness to this summit meeting.
Francis I and the Pope meet right here, in the main square. They offer gifts to the people like food or clothes. Francis I even demonstrates his thaumaturgic power, which is the miraculous gift that the kings of France had to heal the sick just by sight and touch. The event is documented by this 17th century fresco, and where we indeed see Francis I healing the women of the people. It is probably
No doubt it was on this occasion that Leonardo and the King of France would have met.
The interview in Bologna, brief but intense. One must imagine that Leonardo must have been fascinated by Francois I, a young king full of ambition, someone who even wants to become emperor, undoubtedly very quickly. The victor of Marignan. He's truly the man who inspires dreams, the ideal prince.
He is a giant, handsome, who pleases women, who is admirable, who knows how to fight. He is a troubadour, a courtier, a beautiful soul.
For his part, Leonardo sees Francois I, the man he had dreamed of all his life, a paternal protective patron who did not ask him to receive specific commissions sporadically, but rather to work at his leisure in complete tranquility.
On the other side, one can imagine a young Francis I who wants precisely to create the most brilliant court in Europe. He is greatly influenced by what he sees in Italy, by its marvelous courts, and he thought that maybe if he could bring Leonardo out of Italy, it would be an ornament, a jewel for his court.
Francis I urges Leonardo to come to France. A letter from his advisor, Lord Gouffier de Bonnivet, to the French ambassador in Rome conveys this enthusiasm.
I beg you to ask Monsieur Léonard to come before the king, for the said lord awaits him with great devotion, and assures him confidently that he will be welcomed by both the king and his mother.
And it will work since Leonard might think a little. It must be said that he is old, Leonard, at that time. And so it must have been a very long, arduous, difficult journey, and he was probably aware that it was the last trip. He would never come back.
He thus accepts the invitation and travels to France, where he will spend the last 3 years of his life, taking with him notably the Mona Lisa, Saint Anne, and Saint John the Baptist.
It's very moving. Imagine Leonardo da Vinci during his move, the paintings packed more or less well. These paintings, moreover, are extraordinarily fragile. We treat them like sacred relics today, barely daring to touch them, and back then they were treated like something completely natural. It's human, and it's frightening.
A stone's throw from the Chateau d'Amboise, Leonardo da Vinci settles at Clos Lucé with a generous salary and ideal working conditions. Since 1854, the St. Brice family has owned this estate. For several decades, she has made it her mission to restore and bring this unique place back to life in order to pass on the legacy and memory of Leonardo da Vinci.
When Leonardo da Vinci arrives here at the Clos Lucé, he came with his favorite disciple Francesco Melzi, but also Battista da Villanis, who is his new Milanese servant. He is surrounded by the royal family with affection. They speak Italian both in the town and at court. There are Italian artists in this town of Amboise, and so for Leonardo, it is a new renaissance. But Leonardo is also an absolutely exceptional party organizer, a talented director. He will organize no fewer than 4 grand parties here.
And these celebrations are magnificent. And they are held with everything Leonardo knows how to do. That means creating fireworks to show that the French court is undoubtedly one of the most refined in Europe.
A master in scenography and special effects since his Milanese years, Leonardo da Vinci recreates in France the memorable Feast of Paradise. And the old master has more than one trick up his sleeve to enchant the court. One automaton in particular stands out: the mechanical lion. In Bologna, it was reconstructed identically by a historian expert in ancient robotics.
So the mechanical lion is an amazing automaton, and nothing like it could have been built before. It's an invention that anticipates Western mechanical science by 2 or 3 centuries. It works with a spring system, and even a frequency change mechanism that involves a differential. There's already the seed of calculus and the infinitesimal. Even if it isn't explicitly stated, the concept is already there because there are different movements, like a car shifting into reverse gear.
First, there was terror. Ah, my goodness, a lion is there, and then finally the fascination. But how is it that this object moves by itself? And then, as the cherry on top, the touch of delicacy, the lily that appears.
And he will recreate it multiple times to actually captivate the court with this idea that the automata give life to a work of art, certainly ephemeral, but which impresses the public greatly.
He invents, he amazes, he marvels.
Beyond the splendor and grand spectacles, the bond between Leonard and Francois I is expressed daily in all simplicity.
Francis I was innamorato, madly in love with Leonardo.
They were made for each other, having an almost filial respect for one another. Francis I lost his father at the age of 2, and in Leonardo, he sees a kind of spiritual father, but also a mentor. This is how these two men developed an extraordinary intellectual passion. And by the way, Francis I will call Leonardo several times, my father.
Upon his arrival, the king entrusts Leonardo with an enormous project to build the royal palace in an ideal city to host the court. The chosen location is Romorantin, playground of the childhood of Francis I, where part of his mother Louise of Savoy's castle still exists.
She's a great lady, a strong-minded woman. Today, we would say a politician. She really is someone who, in the first 10 years of the king's reign, she is the one who commands a little. The king is very young, you know. Louise de Savoy plays a very important role in Leonardo's arrival, as it seems that in the mind of the king and his mother, even before meeting Leonardo, there is already a project for a royal castle, and the project will become increasingly grand after the meeting with Leonardo.
Leonard holds the triple title of engineer, painter and architect. As an engineer, Leonard is interesting, because he can carry out architectural work in France to create a palace. It happens that the French do not have a palace. They have castles, but they are somewhat provincial compared to what exists in Italy. So Leonardo is invited to create a palace in Romorantin.
The idea is a grand castle with stables, a city, a new Rome.
Leonard only sketched this grand project, but the Salon Museum in Romorantin still holds the surveys and plans carried out by Leonard himself.
The text in Rondel is one of the 2 codices that includes the Romorantin project. There are 3 pages concerning the Romorantin, particularly this one, which presents the general plan. And then there are also more technical drawings, particularly a pump system. It's a project where hydraulics are fundamental. The primary idea of the project is the relationship with water and the river, of course.
Here is a palace that was supposed to reflect on the water, and the palace would have been extended by an ideal city about 400 meters long. So, something colossal and unprecedented in France.
But Leonardo da Vinci has even bigger plans. A development of French waterways. He particularly wants to divert the Cher to increase the level of the river in Romorantin, the Saldre. Leonard even envisions colossal works that could create a link between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean.
By digging a first canal that would connect Romorantin to the Atlantic, another to the English Channel, a third to the Mediterranean, and maybe a fourth to the Rhine. It was intended to make it the hub that would turn this city into a real capital.
He worked on it a lot during the year 1517, but he is already old and sick, and the project is probably abandoned during the year 1518.
Failing to carry out such projects, and as long as his health permits, Leonard tirelessly returns to his favorite works. One in particular, the Saint Anne. Leonardo will refine it for 15 years, until his last breath. Hung in the Grand Gallery of the Louvre, this painting remains unfinished, and yet it touches perfection.
This is Leonard's will. He represented all of nature in that painting. It's the fruit of his entire life. In other words, I wanted to be a great painter. I wanted to be very great. And here is the result of what I paint.
The protective and reassuring momentum that connects all the characters, particularly the Virgin Mary and the child, seems to resonate with the artist's personal life.
It is truly the mother who accepts the sacrifice of her son, and Leonardo wanted to depict that, this moment where the Virgin still wants to hold back. And finally she accepts this fate, which is the necessary destiny for the salvation of humanity. It is possible that he indeed thought about his own situation, since he was an illegitimate son. At the evening of his life, this gaze full of sadness, of melancholy may be a part of identification. And thus, he is the most endearing, the most moving character. It's the least marked smile in the whole painting, the most endearing, the most poignant, the most human because there's still a touch of melancholy, of sadness. It is a budding smile, but it does not entirely hide the sadness. And Leonardo died while building this smile, which is undoubtedly the most subtle and human smile he ever painted in his life.
His entire life, he will work under the image of the woman. He will work a lot on this mother-child, mother-son relationship, which he always interprets in the sense of immense tenderness. They are always protective, loving, very gentle Madonnas for him.
The year 1519, Leonard, age 67, suffers from paralysis and loses the use of his right hand. Confined to his room at Clos Lucé, the old lion sees his strength decline day by day, until the 2nd of May.
He receives the last sacraments of the Church. Leonard breathes his last and commends his soul to God.
At his bedside was his faithful collaborator, friend, and assistant, Francesco Melzi.
The letter written by Melzi to Leonardo's half-brother is obviously a letter full of sadness and awareness that a truly illustrious person among the greatest humans has passed. It is the death of a very great man.
1 year before his death, the master had taken care to dictate his last wishes to the notary in Ambroise. A copy is today kept at the Château d'Ambroise.
So Leonard makes arrangements for these assets to be distributed, and particularly for the benefit of two people who were very important in his life. Sala is well known, who will inherit a number of artworks, and then Melzi, who is there, who accompanies him, who will assist him until his last moments, and who will also have a very important role for the memory of Leonardo da Vinci's work. The funeral took place 10 days after his death, and he wanted the funeral to befit a great lord. That is to say, the entire clergy, the friars minor. Everyone is called for Leonardo's funeral in the collegiate church, in the king's church, and then the procession, very solemnly, very remarkably, with 60 poor people carrying torches, and therefore accompanying Leonardo's coffin.
The time is for contemplation. In the Kingdom of France, one man cries in particular,
Legend has it that he died in the arms of King Francis I. It's very symbolic, this prince of arts and letters receiving the last breath of this great scholar, this great scientist, this great artist.
From that, we obviously know it is a complete legend, since on the day of Leonardo's death, Francis I was in Fontainebleau for the baptism of another of his sons.
In the 19th century, painters like Ingres seized upon this legend and crafted a romantic vision of the king at Leonardo's bedside.
And considered him truly an extraordinary personality. And so, it is very likely that he might have embraced Leonardo, perhaps in his bed, to comfort him, encourage him to get better, to feel better. So, I think it is based on something, an anecdote that really happened.
How to understand this universal passion for the Mona Lisa, with people rushing in crowds to take selfies with her? I must say it is a mystery to me.
She is impressive, and above all, she is alive. There is an interaction that happens with her. The first time I saw the Mona Lisa up close, I thought, but it's incredible how this painting is done. It is truly alive. There is a vibration in the material. This isn't normal? Am I crazy or what?
The Mona Lisa can drive people mad. Oil painting on a poplar panel 77 by 53 centimeters. It indeed seems very much alive. The Louvre Museum receives numerous letters from around the world regarding the painting, some addressed directly to Mona Lisa herself.
Lady Mona Lisa, known as La Gioconda, Louvre Museum, Paris. For example, here it is. It's a Mr. Léon, and he writes to her, "My dear Mona, I am sorry to have kept you waiting. I could not free myself due to my obligations related to the commemorations of the armistice of the First World War. We must show our Mona the vacation photos. Hi Mona, hi Lisa. We're in Prague because the weather is nice. We always smile full of love. Kisses."
Before being a myth, the Mona Lisa was first a woman of flesh and blood, Lisa Maria Gherardini, alias Mona Lisa, which means Lady Lisa. She is the second wife of a cloth merchant, Francesco del Giocondo. The story of the painting begins in Tuscany in 1503 under obscure circumstances, but the old villa of the Gherardini family still exists today at Vignamaggio, in the heart of Chianti. It is a vacation spot where Leonardo da Vinci is said to have been invited, according to local legend.
To welcome the master, they arranged a sumptuous banquet with game and various meats. Unfortunately, Leonardo is a strict vegetarian and didn't eat anything. So they tried to make him drink wine. Unfortunately, he doesn't drink alcohol. So it ended in a complete disaster. So there is a local legend that is very beautiful and very amusing. Leonard entered his room, but he is joined by little Lisa, who was a friend of the family at the time and came to see him. They would have gotten along well. This is the moment when the local legend says he sketched the face of Lisa, who would later become the Mona Lisa.
Dated October 1503, which is the time when Leonardo begins the Mona Lisa, a note written by Agostino Vespucci, a Florentine clerk, specifically mentions Lisa del Giocondo regarding Leonardo's painting. It is today the irrefutable proof of the identity of the model. But Leonardo's attachment to this painting until the end of his life suggests that, in his eyes, it was much more than a portrait.
This painting, little by little, has become something other than the portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. It has become the expression of a woman who, by herself, represents the universality of humankind.
In the Mona Lisa, she succeeded in representing the humanity of which a woman is capable. This inner world that is truly infinite, vast, deep, and moreover, this landscape resonates with this humanity. Through this smile, through this gaze, Lisa establishes a complicity and intimacy with her viewer that has never been seen in the entire history of painting.
It shocked people. We realized that it is a painting where Leonardo succeeded in giving it vibration. Leonardo da Vinci's material is practically nothing. They are veils of paint. How did he lay down his veils? It remains truly realistic.
This mystery, the Center for Research and Restoration of the Museums of France, is trying to unravel its secrets through radiographic analysis.
So here we are in front of the X-ray of the Beautiful Gardener, a painting by Raphael contemporary to the Mona Lisa. We have a contrast that corresponds to what we generally see for all painters of that era.
In comparison, the X-ray of the Mona Lisa is puzzling.
These are X-rays that look kind of like they are messed up, ghostly with blurred outlines. It's difficult to discern the visible composition, even though here we can get an idea of the head and here the neckline. But then where are the crossed hands? Where is the landscape? It remains very ghostly.
How is that possible? There is no brushstroke, you can't see anything, it's evanescent. There is this famous sfumato that surrounds the characters. You don't see the point where the face becomes clothing, and where the clothing becomes landscape. Everything blends and seems harmonious, and appears to exist on its own.
Alive, the Mona Lisa is also for reasons tied to the electronic control hidden in a wooden box. Like in intensive care, Mona Lisa is kept 24 hours a day in a stable environment of 20 degrees and 50% humidity.
It is a painting that cannot be taken out because it is extremely fragile. If you could really see it placed on a table, it is a sheet of paper. It is extremely thin and especially worse than a sheet of paper. It is a painting that is completely curved. You know, it is warped. And you could also see the crack, which is extremely long. It reaches right up to the face of the Mona Lisa. The crack stopped almost miraculously just above the head of the Mona Lisa, but with a climatic accident, it could break in two. We would inevitably lose some material. The face of the Mona Lisa would break in two suddenly. So, it's really a painting that needs to be monitored every day. I would even say second by second.
The Mona Lisa has not always been so well protected. On August 22nd, 1911, the most famous woman in the world is stolen by a 30-year-old Italian worker.
In a few minutes, he takes the Mona Lisa, manages to disassemble everything quickly in a service corridor, and escapes with the painting under his arm. It is a national tragedy, of course, because it's an element of French heritage disappearing in a spectacular way, and international, because the news becomes global as early as August 1911. The impact is absolutely colossal.
Vincenzo Peruggia is none other than the craftsman who installed a glass protecting the painting. For more than 2 years, he hides the Mona Lisa in his room in Paris. But in December 1913, he takes it to Florence to sell it to an antique dealer and gets arrested.
The motivations for the theft he puts forward are indeed the return to Italy of an old masterpiece.
France breathes. The Mona Lisa has returned to its place in the Louvre. Since then, the curators have opposed any outings. A rare exception, Mona Lisa lands in New York in 1963, welcomed like a star at the initiative of the Minister of Culture, André Malraux. She is loaned for the beautiful eyes of another icon, Jackie Kennedy.
The image of the painting will multiply both through postcards, photographs, and color reproductions. It is the first time, I think, that a work of art is reproduced in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide.
The copies of the painting date back to Leonardo's own time, like the Mona Lisa from the Prado Museum in Madrid made by his own workshop. But the Mona Lisa does not only have twin sisters. The Condé Museum at the Chantilly Castle holds a strange cousin of the Florentine lady.
So it is about a sketch called The Nude Mona Lisa. It's a totally enigmatic work that came out of Leonardo da Vinci's workshop and gives rise to a lot of speculation. We found many resemblances to the painting in the Louvre by the position of the hands. The light twist of the torso, which brings her closer to the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, is her enigmatic smile, slightly sketched, which is completely Leonardesque. It's also the velvety treatment. In fact, we are here before all the mysteries of the Mona Lisa, to which the mysteries of this nudity, this hairstyle, this gaze of a perhaps imaginary character that has been drawn towards universal beauty, have been added.
The Archives Department of the Louvre catalogues all publications about the Mona Lisa since 1503. And alongside the official files, he also accumulates countless theories and revelations that are at the very least original. Here, they are called Leonardo's delusions.
These are letters that are neither historical nor scientific. These are all the people who think they have discovered the secret of the Mona Lisa, the mystery she is supposed to hide. And so we have all the hypotheses, all the most incredible theories. The whole world writes to the Louvre about the mystery of the Mona Lisa.
Last famous example, the Da Vinci Code. This novel by the American Dan Brown is a worldwide bestseller adapted into a film. He makes Leonardo the Grand Master of a secret society, and his most famous paintings are said to be scattered with coded messages.
It's true that with Leonard, there is an ambiguity that lends itself perfectly to being adopted by any esoteric movement. There are mysterious elements in his life, in his statements. There is this play of shadow and light that recurs very frequently in his writings.
We knew he had done dissections. Could he not have been a bit of a necromancer? Someone who digs up corpses, cuts them up to study them, etc.? Doesn't that touch on black magic?
Leonard lives in a time where magical thinking is very important. Astrology was very fashionable at the court of the Medici. It was a time when Hermes Trismegistus was rediscovered, when secrets were sought in Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Leonard still leaves an element of mystery, and the mystery is pursued by him as a form of aesthetic seduction. If you look at St. John the Baptist, he appears in the dark, in this shadow.
St. John the Baptist is the final painting undertaken by Leonardo da Vinci. This masterpiece depicts the last prophet announcing the coming of Christ on earth.
It's true that after the Mona Lisa, St. John the Baptist is the painting that is undoubtedly the one considered the most mysterious, but I would even say the one that makes you the most uncomfortable. He looks at us with much more intrusive eyes, also with a much more pronounced smile. We are looking at someone very ambiguous, and it's hard when seeing this painting for the first time to interpret it. First, because the religious symbols are somewhat hidden. The cross he holds is barely visible. And then, there is this very strong gesture, this hand reaching towards the sky. The indication that the real truth is that Jesus will arrive soon.
This gesture means to look. In my opinion, it just means look. The mystery is everywhere, the beauty is everywhere.
One can certainly admit that Leonard has heterodox theological ideas, without making him a specialist in all the magical theories of antiquity, including Egyptian theories. Finally, the whole idea that Leonard would have been an initiate into some esoteric rites, there would be workers on it.
It is the contradiction in Leonardo's work itself, which is completely rational, intelligent, coherent from start to finish, and precisely refuses this kind of explanation.
Another source of misunderstanding, the Vitruvian Man. Drawn by Leonardo after an ancient treatise on the ideal proportions of the human body, it is often interpreted as a symbol of cosmic harmony that would hide the golden ratio, that is, a divine proportion synonymous with absolute beauty.
Contrary to popular belief, the golden ratio is absolutely not in the Vitruvian Man. There is still a fundamental idea that in the human microcosm, there are harmonic proportions. Vitruvius's text explains that a man can fit into a circle and a square, and Leonardo finds his particular solution by offsetting the square relative to the circle. One might also think that the Vitruvian Man, such a well-known Leonardian icon, could very well be Leonardo da Vinci himself.
I believe that Leonard had a very high opinion of himself, and indeed saw himself not quite as the equal of God, but certainly as someone performing the same act of creation.
A figure of absolute genius, Leonardo da Vinci enjoys an exceptional legacy. Virtuoso artist, visionary engineer, poet of life. Each century has sought its model in him.
A great figure can take on any face we want and must adapt to nearly all centuries, all eras, and answer almost all questions. And for that, Leonardo provides material for quite some time.
Leonardo da Vinci is immortal, and his work has no boundaries. His work is universal.
That's Leonardo's genius, to have shown that a life obsessed with perfection allows for doing few things, but the few things done are absolutely dazzling. Today we are all about productivity and speed. He's exactly the opposite.
Leonardo's inventions have become so ingrained in everyday language and visuals that we hardly even notice them today. He's a symbol for parking lots, brands, and blue jeans. He can sell just about anything because, precisely, he holds this mythological value.
Leonardo has a charm that has passed through the centuries. He is irresistible. He is such a dense, profound, and complete personality. It's true that sometimes, when studying about Leonardo, it feels like they are still family, right?